So today we're going to take a few minutes to talk about something called the astral world. I'll give a very brief overview as to what it means and where it comes from, and then I'm going to deep dive into how it relates within the context of Berserk. But before I begin, if you would like to be able to get a hands-on look at what the deepest layer of the astral world looks like, go ahead and subscribe to my channel, because once I reach 100k, I plan to take you all on a big old field trip to the hallowed grounds of ceremony and commemorate that event with a grand sacrifice. A grand pizza party. Yes, you are all invited to my epic pizza party, so please go ahead and subscribe. Once I hit that 100k, we're gonna deep dive. Now look, when it comes to real-world history and context of what the astral world is, it really depends on what you're looking at and what teachers and philosophies that you're following in order to define it for you. I'm just going to give you a very brief, spark notes, generalized consensus of the astral world, and then I'll deep dive into how it relates to the Berserk manga. In the most basic overview that I can say, the astral world is a spiritual plane that overlaps our physical world. The physical world being everything that we perceive with our five senses. The world of mankind, it's physical, it's tangible, something we can reach out and touch. The astral world exists within the spiritual realm and is considered to be home of incorporeal beings like spirits, angels, and demons. Some philosophies have the astral world being a place where human souls will reside after death and before passing on to either heaven or hell. And in other ideas and religions, the soul exists here both before and after life, as just like the energy and matter that cannot be created or destroyed, nor can the soul. This leads into the theory of reincarnation, and that the astral world is where you return to temporarily before again returning to life in another form, constantly repeating the cycle. Some view this as a good thing, and others view it as something that you must keep doing until you reach a sort of enlightened state. And again, enlightenment can mean many different things depending on what ideas you associate it with. Some might even consider enlightenment the same thing as reaching an eventual heaven. A term that probably everybody has heard before in one form or another is astral projection. This is being able to reach a deep meditative state where you are able to take control of what would be your soul or your energy that exists beyond your physical body. And you're able to explore the astral world traveling deeper into a space rather than a distance. When thinking about the astral world, you have to think of it abstractly. It's not like walking from point A to point B down the street, but rather staying in that street and transcending from point A to point G, K, or Z. You're physically staying in the same place, but tapping into what you could call your soul, which is like a conscious form of energy, and with that you aren't limited by the physical barriers, and you could traverse through energy as energy. At least that's how I understand it. But anyways, before I lose you completely, let me get back into Berserk. In Berserk, the concept of the astral world has existed ever since the early days of the Black Swordsman arc, and just like any good author, Miura leaves a lot of the finer details up to interpretation. But I do like that despite a lot about his lore being later explained, the ambiguity of the early days doesn't really contradict anything that he brings up later on. And just like real-world definitions of the astral world, Berserk's astral world exists within the same space as the physical, overlapping it, and consists of many different layers. To make it simple to think about, just imagine each layer as like a different dimension, and different space all its own. But with each layer, as you go deeper, there is an overlap, kind of like a chain connecting to other pieces going deeper and deeper down, all residing within the same space, if that makes sense. The astral world in Berserk is home of many spiritual and mythological creatures residing in its more shallow layers. Creatures like elves, fauns, marrows, and many more generally pleasant and good-natured species. Coming from a spiritual realm and existing within shallow layers means that on occasion, those creatures would take a more corporeal form and be able to interact and even exist within the physical plane. Kind of like a small gateway that's allowing them in. And this is usually within particular areas of the physical world that are generally regarded as more mystical or open to supernatural elements. The Misty Valley was once home to many elves, and other various places in the world of Berserk show that there was once shrines built and respect given to these astral beings that would wander into the physical. This brief overlap could also be called an interstice, where the astral and physical worlds overlap to such a degree that they exist simultaneously within the same space. As Guts was cursed with the brand of sacrifice, his body and spirit is constantly aligned within an interstice, causing him to be able to sense when demonic beings are close, as well as contributes to him being haunted every night by malicious spirits. And that's the thing too. So the interstice is kind of where the physical and astral meet in its shallowest layers. Thinking of the astral world like a pool, the interstice is dipping your toe into the water. You exist within both at the same time and can interact with each other. Whereas once you are completely submerged within that pool, you rely on your astral self alone. But I'll get to that in a moment. So when you die in Berserk, which, let's be honest, is usually the result of some extreme misfortune and negativity, your soul would obviously be angry and restless, and as you begin to lose your sense of self as a spirit, you basically just become a force of restless and vengeful energy. These souls can attack and possess someone or something within an interstice and act out that animosity and rage through the person they are possessing. But instead of like a conscious soul possessing a person and controlling their body with their own will, instead it's like the feelings and emotions of that soul amplify the darkness within the person that they are possessing. Possessing Farnese had her act out her lustful, bottled-up feelings, and possessing Guts has him acting out his darkest thoughts of killing those around him so that he could be left alone on his crusade of vengeance. Truthfully, human souls should only exist a short while within the shallow astral layers before passing on to heaven or hell or wherever they go, but since most people are not able to find that peace and resolution, their souls become trapped in this spiteful and hateful energetic way. Particular people, like witches and mages, have made it their life's obsession to learn the secrets of the astral world and can also use it as a means to acquire a large amount of power for a limited time. This is the way that Berserk does magic. Through training and deep meditation, just like astral projection, a magic user can take their ethereal selves, like their souls, and shape it into a form that mimics their physical body, giving them control and consciousness over it and allowing them to travel willingly and knowingly throughout the astral world. This is called their luminous body. They use this to search for a spirit in which to make a request to borrow power from. Spirits are generally connected to the elements like water, earth, wind, and fire, and I would say that the elements and the elemental kings are more neutral than anything else. They don't really have an affiliation with good or evil, they just simply are. They exist. Kind of like how everything in the physical world just exists, and it's kind of up to us as humans as we choose how to utilize them. Anyway, a magic user can channel the power of a spirit through their body and create effects within the physical world as a result. And there are some dangers about going too deep within the astral world. The deeper you go into the astral world, the darker it gets. Imagining the pool analogy once again, the deeper you go into the water, the harder it is to maintain your grounded self. You start floating, you start sinking, and eventually you're gasping for air, going farther down than you ever should. Just like how there are majestic, positive astral creatures, there are also creatures born from darkness, yin and yang, literally created from the subconscious fears of mankind. Qliphoth, which I never pronounce right apparently, is the name given to an area where monsters like trolls and ogres are spawned from. Creatures that cause humans fear in our nightmares and are sort of manifested into existence here. Think of it like if we are all connected by matter and energy and we all have collective consciousness that exists within us, Qliphoth is like the place where fears and superstitions are dumped. If enough people over a large enough scale all have the same fears and fantasies of monsters in the dark that can kill us, then this is where they all end up. Deeper than that still, we start to get into giant mythological beings that could be considered gods. And even deeper down than that, things start to become unrecognizable. Physics are no longer in play, and the layers further down become disjointed and more abstract. A perfect example of this being the MC Escher style location where we first meet the God Hand in the series. This is seemingly the farthest down you can get before reaching the abyss, and the farthest you would be able to exist still conscious of yourself somewhat of who you are. But reaching this plane seems to be only possible by supernatural means, such as a Bailet. This device, destined to somebody through fate and causality, is only activated by a person's heightened desire and despair. then transporting them straight to this nexus, skipping the other layers entirely. And here, the God Hand exists, and should you receive an audience with them, you are either here to make a sacrifice, or become one. And finally, the darkest, deepest levels enter into the Abyss, otherwise known as Hell itself. The Abyss is comprised of what is known as the Vortex of Souls, where many of those restless spirits eventually end up, alongside anybody who has tangled with demonkind, darkness, and evil. This is your endless, eternal swirling of souls, all entwined, resonating with their feelings of anger, rage, darkness, and suffering. Ending up in here, you eventually lose all sense of ego and consciousness of who you are. You are no longer in any sense of control of yourself, and you become nothing more than an exemplified feeling of torment that is never ending. Individuality is gone, and you are part of the collective, creating a whirlwind of agony. You can see that fresh souls into the Abyss still retain a bit of themselves, like when Vargas recently died and then was there to pull in the count, but you would only exist in this way for some time before becoming fully part of the collective. And at the bottom of the Abyss, we start to transfer into the idea world, the origin of existence itself, and the true connective tissue between all living and non-living things. And here we find the idea of evil. And I don't plan to get in depth with the idea of evil in this video, I'll save that for another time, but in short, the idea of evil is the result for life desiring a reason for its suffering, manifesting from the core consciousness that connects everything, and working to manipulate time and fate itself in order to give humanity whatever it is it desires. It is responsible for creating the God Hand and the Apostles, all pushing and leading humanity in a specific direction over thousands of years that would eventually result in the great roar of the astral world. So whatever the ultimate scheme of the idea of evil in the God Hand is still left vague, but we can infer that the balance between the astral and physical worlds being disrupted was a large part of it. You can imagine that the physical world and the world of the dead and mythological creatures should largely remain separate. One is where we exist during life, and the other is where we go after, or in some beliefs also before life. This separation between worlds was kept in check by things called the spirit trees, in particular areas of the world of interstices that existed, surrounded by a spirit tree that worked as sort of a siphon or to absorb astral energy to that area in order to prevent it from leaking into the physical world in a widespread way. Flora's mansion was a prime location, as well as Elfhelm. By destroying and burning down these trees, it gave Griffith the means to enact his plan to merge the worlds together. But even on top of that, it stated that 1,000 years ago, people were more in tune with the astral world and what it was. People believed in spirits and elves and creatures, and these places where the interstices existed were seen as holy or sacred, something to be revered and respected. But within the last 1,000 years, and in accordance with the plans of the idea of evil, things involving the spiritual have been considered wrong, evil, and eventually heresy. And the introduction of the Holy See, which is sort of a super harsh, strict version of the Roman Catholic Church of the medieval era, has detached humanity at large from the spiritual into a more monotheistic style of worship, worshipping a single god rather than multiple elemental spirits, which weren't really worshipped, they were more just respected. And as belief can manifest and shape reality, the positive astral creatures slowly started to dissipate from the physical world. So, with mankind's connection to magic and the spiritual weakened and outlawed, it got to the point where people were incapable of even perceiving spiritual beings right in front of their faces, and instead turned their faith into the idea of a prophet that would come rescue them from darkness. Enter Griffith, the Hawk of Light, and yeah, you know the story. And then once people's faith were clearly in line, Griffith used Skull Knight's sword, capable of splitting open a rift in space, that was meant as a weapon to send Griffith himself into the abyss, instead was used to cut open Ganishka and use his body as the World Tree, and link the astral and physical worlds together as one, essentially making the entire planet an interstice. reintroducing humanity to the supernatural that had been 1,000 years to build up within their fears and anxieties, unleashing monsters onto the entire planet, and leading people into the only safe haven on Earth, which is Falconia. Ruled by a member of the God Hand, who is hidden under the facade of his former human face. Now, personally, I don't believe we have a full, complete merger yet, because there still is the question of where the other God Hand members are, and I think the final spirit tree is located on Elfhelm, which has yet to be destroyed. And that could be the last remaining link stopping the God Hand, or maybe even the Abyss itself, from engulfing what is left of humanity. But that's just a theory. A Berserk theory. But anyways, guys, I hope this gives you a full, good recap of what the Astral World is and how it plays a part within the Berserk story. I know my explanations might not be perfect, but hopefully I could put it into a way that you understand, or at least explain it to you the way that I understand it. As of yet, we are not sure if or how Berserk will ever continue, but it's always fun to deep dive back into the lore of the story and give you guys some fun Monster Manual videos. Let me know what you think about the Berserk's Astral World and your theories about how it applies to the overall narrative and the God Hand's plans. Also, maybe I should do a video on the Idea World too, and talk more about the idea of evil. I guess then I could also do a video on the physical world and just be like, yeah, here it is, you're in it, the video's over. Anyways, please subscribe to the channel if you like this, because I'm trying really, really hard to reach 100K. Getting there slowly but surely. Also, like the video, comment, check out the links in the description for my Patreon, merch store, and my social media links. Other than that, guys, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll talk to you next time.